All right, welcome to the deep dive. Step right up. The world of biotechnology and pharmaceuticals. Always buzzing, always moving, always, let's be honest, a little overwhelming with the sheer volume of information.
It really is just constant motion.
It's a space driven by incredible science, yes, but also by massive strategic plays from the big players. These aren't just dry business transactions, they're the moments where cutting-edge lab work gets the fuel it needs to potentially become a real treatment.
They're the points where potential energy becomes kinetic, you could say.
Yeah, exactly. They're the multi-billion-dollar handshake deals that reshape everything. And for you, trying to stay on top of all this, you're likely juggling a lot, maybe prepping for something, maybe just intensely curious. Whatever it is, you don't have time to drink from the fire hose of every press release and analyst report.
Information overload is definitely real in this space.
That's where we come in. Our mission in this deep dive is to be your shortcut. We're going to take a specific stack of source material, share with us a fantastic report, zeroing in on some of the biggest deals from the very beginning of 2025, and pull out the absolute most important nuggets.
The key takeaways. Yeah.
The surprising facts, the key drivers, the aha moments that help you quickly grasp what's happening and, most importantly, why it matters to you.
And focusing on these major transactions, this deal flow, is precisely how you read the tea leaves of the industry. These aren't just figures on a balance sheet.
Not at all.
They are incredibly powerful indicators of where the science is truly heading, which therapeutic areas are attracting the most serious capital, and which technologies companies believe will fundamentally shape the future of medicine. The period covered by this report, the first 4 months of 2025, appears to have been particularly dynamic in this regard. A lot happened.
So the source material we're dissecting today comes from a company called USEN, or ZIA. They operate in the biotech intelligence space, providing platforms that help navigate this incredibly complex landscape.
They provide data and analytics.
This specific report, helpfully, narrows the focus to what they call heavyweight global pharma transactions, essentially, the really big ones that took place between January 1st and April 30th, 2025.
That's right. And tools like Dewey's platforms, with their integrated databases for things like new drug intelligence, they call it synapse, or biological sequences, chemical structures. They even have AI agents now, like their Eureka LS AI agent. These are becoming indispensable.
Yeah, you almost need them to make sense of it all.
You really do. They let you cut through the noise to see patent landscapes, track competitive movements, and yes, identify these significant market transactions. This report specifically leveraged their Synapse database, applying a filter for deals exceeding a total value of $1 billion within that 4-month window.
$1 billion minimum. So these are the blockbusters.
Exactly. That process identified a list of 21 such transactions. Now, the report is upfront in noting that data can always vary slightly based on different sources, timing of reporting, or even the specific search parameters you use.
Sure, that makes sense. Data reporting always has nuances.
Precisely. And that kind of transparency isn't a weakness. It actually reinforces the importance of understanding the source and method behind the data you're looking at, especially in a field this complex. You need to know how they got the number.
Agreed. So our goal is simple. Take that list of 21 massive deals, walk you through the most notable ones, pinpointing who bought what the science or tech was, the sheer scale of the money.
The billions involved.
And then zoom out to figure out what these individual pieces tell us about the overall picture of the biotech market right now. Ready? Let's unpack the first big headline from this report. Kicking us off, we have Johnson & Johnson making a huge splash with their acquisition of Intra-Cellular Therapies. This was a massive deal coming in at $14.6 billion.
Just shy of $15 billion, that's a statement.
It really is. The report notes it closed on April 2nd, 2025, but the announcement that sent ripples through the market happened earlier, on January 13th. It was an all-cash transaction, with J&J offering $132 per share, putting the total equity value right around that $14.6 billion mark.
This acquisition is a very clear play for J&J to significantly bolster their neuroscience portfolio. The crown jewel here is undoubtedly Kplyt, also known by its generic name, lumateperone.
KPLYT.
Okay, KPL is an oral therapy taken once a day. It was already approved for adult schizophrenia, which is, a substantial market in itself. But its real differentiator, and what's highlighted in the source, is its unique approval profile. It's the first and only FDA-approved treatment specifically for the depressive episodes that occur in both bipolar I and bipolar II disorder.
Wow. First and only for both bipolar I and II depression. That's specific.
Very specific and very important. And critically, it can be used either on its own as a monotherapy or added to existing treatments like lithium or Valpro, so as an adjunct therapy. This dual utility across schizophrenia and bipolar depression gives it a strong competitive edge. The clinical evidence supporting this bipolar depression indication is compelling. The report details a key phase 3 study called Study 403. This was a placebo-controlled trial in patients experiencing major depressive episodes within either bipolar I or target disorder, specifically those with what they call mixed features.
Mixed features, meaning maybe some manic symptoms alongside the depression.
Exactly, elements of both. And the study successfully met its primary goal, which was showing a significant improvement in the Montgomery-Åsberg Depression Rating Scale score. That's the MA-DIRA scale, a standard measure compared to placebo.
Okay, so it worked better than nothing.
Significantly better.
Yeah.
And figure 1 in the report gives us a great visual on these results. So if you picture a graph, you've got time along the bottom axis, maybe out to day 43, and the MA-DIRA depression score on the vertical axis, where lower is better.
Okay, got it.
You can see the lines for the patients taking Caplyta clearly separating, dropping further down in the placebo line. The report says it shows this improvement on both the MA-DIRA score and another scale, the Clinical Global Impression Severity Scale, or CGIS.
So doctors saw improvement too, not just the rating scale numbers.
Correct. And it shows this across different patient subgroups. The report gives the actual numbers for the MA-DIRA's improvement the least squares mean difference, or LSMD, compared to placebo. It was MADRS 5.7 for the combined group, MADRS 5.9 for MDD alone, and MADRS 5.7 for bipolar depression alone.
Okay, so those negative numbers mean a bigger drop in symptoms compared to placebo, and pretty consistent across the groups.
Exactly. Consistent and statistically significant. The point here is that these differences demonstrate a meaningful clinical benefit for patients struggling with these really difficult-to-treat depressive episodes.
And there's more data, right? The report also points to 2 other large phase 3 studies, 501 and 502. These looked at Caplyta as an adjunctive treatment, so added on for major depressive disorder, MDD, more broadly.
Yeah.
And those also showed significant and clinically meaningful improvements. Importantly, the safety profile was consistent with what they'd already seen. No new red flags popped up, which is always good news.
Absolutely crucial. Building on that strong data, in February 2025, Intra-Cellular submitted a supplemental NDA that's a new drug application to the FDA, specifically for that adjunctive MDD indication. And the FDA accepted it for review.
So that could broaden its use even further.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
If that gets approved, it's a big deal. The report suggests Caplyta could potentially be the first therapy in around 15 years approved for symptoms of both MDD and bipolar depression. That really underscores the unmet need they're addressing here.
15 years is a long time in drug development.
It is. It highlights the difficulty in finding effective treatments for these complex conditions.
And the pipeline extends beyond that. Figure 2 gives us that snapshot. You see Caplyta highlighted for its approved uses and those ongoing phase 3 trials, adjunctive MDD, bipolar mania, and it even mentions positive data shared late in 2024 for preventing relapse in schizophrenia.
Right, so they're building a strong case across the spectrum.
And the figure also shows ITI 1284 further down the line. What's that one?
Yes, ITI 1284, another piece of the puzzle J&J acquired. The source describes this as a new chemical entity. Specifically, it's a deuterated version of lumateperone.
Deuterated, meaning they swap some hydrogens for deuterium, the heavier isotope?
Precisely. And it's delivered as an oral disintegrating tablet, or ODT, so you place it under the tongue for sublingual absorption. Its mechanism is interesting. It hits multiple targets.
Huh.
The serotonin 2A receptor, the dopamine D2 receptor, and the serotonin transporter. Similar to Caplyta, but potentially a different profile.
And where is it in development?
It's currently in phase 2 trials.
Yeah.
The report mentions 2 key areas, generalized anxiety disorder, GAD, and also for psychiatric symptoms and agitation associated with Alzheimer's disease.
Alzheimer's agitation, that's a huge unmet need too.
A massive one. The appeal here, well, potentially faster absorption with that sublingual ODT delivery.
Right.
And the deuteration. Sometimes that can tweak the pharmacokinetics, maybe improve metabolism or half-life, potentially offering an advantage over the original molecule.
Okay, so stepping back, what does this huge $14.6 billion acquisition by J&J tell you? It seems like a massive bet on the brain.
It screams confidence in the CNS market, absolutely. Specifically depression and schizophrenia. It shows the incredibly high value placed on drugs that already have broad approvals like Capulida
Mhm.
and are addressing significant unmet needs in large patient populations.
And it's not just about the current drug.
No, it also signals interest in next-generation formulations like the ODT and follow-on assets like ITI-1284 that could offer improved delivery or target new related indications within the neuroscience space. It's a major strategic reinforcement for J&J in a really important and challenging therapeutic area.
A major play in a huge market. Okay, let's shift gears slightly and look at Lantheus Holdings acquiring Evergreen Theragnostics. This deal was valued at up to $1 billion.
A different scale, but still significant, especially in its niche.
Right. It wrapped up on April 1st, 2025, announced back on January 28th. The structure was $250 million upfront cash, with the potential for up to $752.5 million more tied to development and sales milestones, specifically around their lead asset, RCTVY, and Evergreen's pipeline.
So Evergreen is a clinical stage company focused on radiopharmaceuticals. That means using radioactive isotopes for diagnosis or therapy, often in cancer.
Got it. Radio drugs.
Essentially, yes. Founded in 2019, they also brought with them a state-of-the-art manufacturing facility, which is critical in this space. Lantheus is already active in this field, so this looks like a move to build scale and specialized capabilities.
Makes sense. Consolidating expertise.
Exactly. And the absolute key asset here is OCTVY, also known as EVG-001. This is a diagnostic agent currently under FDA evaluation. It's a PET imaging agent designed to locate neuroendocrine tumors, or NETs.
PET stands for NETs.
Okay. Now, the report points out how this slots perfectly alongside Lantheus's own therapeutic candidate, PNT-2003. This is the essence of a theranostic pair.
Theranostic. Therapy plus diagnostic.
You got it. You use a diagnostic agent like OCEVY to find the tumors that have a specific biological marker, in this case, somatostatin receptors, which are common on NETs. You light them up on the PE scan.
So you see exactly where the cancer is.
Precisely. And then use a therapeutic agent like PNT-2003, which also targets that same marker, but this time it carries a radioactive payload to deliver radiation precisely to those identified tumors. It's a highly targeted, see-it-treat-it approach.
Very cool. Targeted radiation delivery.
And the acquisition also gives Lantheus Evergreen's manufacturing capability. This includes existing revenue generation from that facility, which bolsters Lantheus's business as a contract development and manufacturing organization, or CDMO, specifically within the radiopharmaceutical space. Owning the manufacturing is a big plus here.
Yeah, I imagine making these radiopharmaceuticals isn't straightforward.
It's highly specialized, requires specific licenses, handling procedures. Controlling that infrastructure is valuable.
The report mentions other pipeline assets from Evergreen, like lutetium-177 EVG-321 and gallium-68 EVG-321, showing their broader radiopharmaceutical focus. And Figure 3 in the report gives us that pipeline view.
Yeah.
It shows Activity nearing potential approval, marked as registration, and others in earlier phases.
Right. It paints a picture of a company focused squarely on radiopharma innovation. And the source elaborates a bit more on OCTVY's use. It's combined with a PET scan to visualize those somatostatin receptor-positive NETs in patients, both adults and children.
Okay.
And they mention a logistical benefit. Apparently, OCTVY comes as a simple 2-bottle kit. This makes it easier for radiopharmacies to prepare the actual injection, the gallium-68 dotato, right there on site using a generator machine. That ease of preparation is actually quite important for making a diagnostic practical for widespread clinical use.
Simplifies the workflow for the pharmacy.
Exactly. Makes it more accessible.
So for you, the listener, what does this $1 billion deal in radiopharmaceuticals signify? What's the takeaway?
Well, it clearly underlines the surging interest and investment in this field for cancer treatment. It's a hot area. It also shows the strategic advantage of controlling both sides of that theranostic coin, finding the tumor and treating it with targeted radiation.
The diagnostic and the therapeutic linked together.
Precisely. And finally, the value of owning dedicated manufacturing infrastructure in this highly specialized, complex area is clearly a major factor in the deal's rationale. It's about the drug, the diagnostic, and the means of production.
Okay, diving into the world of metabolic disorders, specifically obesity, we have Novo Nordisk, already a giant here, licensing LX9851 from Lexicon Pharmaceuticals for potentially up to $1 billion.
Novo Nordisk, obviously huge in diabetes and obesity with their GLP-1s. This is an interesting move for them.
Yeah. This deal was announced on March 28, 2025. The terms give Novo Nordisk exclusive global rights for developing, manufacturing, and selling LX9851 for everything, all indications.
Full control.
Full control.
Lexicon's job was basically to finish the preclinical work needed to file the IND application, that's the investigational new drug application to start human trials. Once that was done, Novo Nordisk takes over completely for all future development and commercialization.
So Lexicon gets it ready for the clinic, Novo takes it from there.
That's the gist. As for the money, Lexicon got up to $75 million upfront and in near-term payments. They're eligible for the full $1 billion potential value, which includes that upfront cash plus significant milestone payments triggered by hitting development progress goals, getting regulatory approvals, and reaching sales targets down the line. Plus, they get tiered royalties on actual sales if it makes it to market.
A classic licensing structure, but with a nice billion-dollar potential upside for Lexicon. Let's talk about LX9851 itself. This is where it gets exciting, I think.
Okay.
The report calls it a first-in-class oral non-incretin development candidate for obesity and related metabolic issues.
Okay, break that down. First-in-class new mechanism. Oral pill form, non-incretin, not like GLP-1.
Exactly, on all counts. That non-incretin part is key, because the current blockbusters, like Novo's own Wegovy or Lilly's Zepbound, are all incretin-based, primarily GLP-1 agonists or dual agonists. LX9851 works differently. It inhibits an enzyme called acyl-CoA synthetase 5, or ACSL5.
ACSL5, what does that do?
ACSL5 plays a crucial role in how our bodies handle fat accumulation and manage energy balance. So inhibiting it is a novel way to potentially tackle obesity.
It's a totally different pathway than the incretins.
Completely different. And the source also mentioned the potential secondary mechanism. It suggests LX9851 might activate something called the ileal brake.
The ileal brake, it's like putting the brakes on your gut.
Sort of, like a physiological feedback loop. Signals from the lower part of the small intestine, the ileum, can slow down how quickly the stomach empties and also suppress appetite signals to the brain. This leads to increased feelings of fullness or satiety. So potentially two ways it could help with weight loss.
Interesting. And figure 4 in the report just gives the basic rundown, right? LX9851, oral, non-incretin, ACSL5 inhibitor for obesity in development. The key facts.
The key facts, yes. Now, the preclinical data presented at Obesity Week in 2024 sounds very promising, according to the report. They did studies in animals.
Okay, what did they find?
They found that LX9851 combined with semaglutide, that's the active ingredient in Ozempic and Wegovy, a GLP-1 significantly boosted weight loss, reduced food intake, and decreased fat mass compared to giving semaglutide alone.
So, synergy, 1 + 1 equals more than 2.
Potentially, yes, at least in these animal models.
Yeah.
And this is really interesting. When they gave LX9851 after stopping semaglutide treatment, it helped prevent the weight regain that often happens, and it even seemed to have a positive impact on fatty liver or hepatic steatosis.
Preventing weight regain, that's a huge issue with current obesity meds.
It absolutely is. So Figure 5 likely shows graphs of this preclinical data. You can imagine seeing the line for the combination therapy dropping significantly faster or lower than the line for semaglutide alone on a weight chart. Or maybe a graph showing less weight regain after stopping treatment when LX9851 was added. That kind of preclinical synergy is exactly what gets companies like Novo Nordisk excited.
Okay, so Novo Nordisk, the king of incretins, is dropping up to $1 billion on a non-incretin oral approach from Lexicon. What's the takeaway for our listener here?
This deal is a massive signal that the obesity market is evolving incredibly fast. Even leaders like Novo aren't content to just rely on their existing blockbuster mechanisms.
They're hedging their bets, or rather expanding their arsenal.
Exactly. They're aggressively investing in novel pathways like ACSL5 inhibition. They're clearly interested in oral options, which are generally preferred by patients over injections. And they're obviously thinking about next-generation combination therapies. Maybe ACSL5 inhibitors plus GLP-1s could be the next big thing.
Right, tackling obesity from multiple angles.
Precisely. It's confirmation that the fight against obesity is expanding rapidly beyond just GLP-1s into new mechanisms and combinations.
Okay, next up, we see a major partnership reflecting the growing importance of innovation coming out of China. Merck licensed HRS-5346 from Hengrui Pharma for a potential $1.97 billion.
Almost $2 billion, another big one. And yes, Hungary is a major Chinese pharmaceutical company.
This deal was announced on March 25, 2025. The structure gives Merck exclusive rights everywhere in the world except Greater China. Hungary keeps control there.
A common structure for these kinds of cross-border deals. Local expertise matters.
Financially, Hungary got a nice $200 million upfront payment. They're eligible for up to $1.77 billion more in milestones tied to hitting development, regulatory, and sales goals. Plus, they'll get royalties on sales in Merck's territory.
Solid deal for Hungary. So let's unpack HRS-5346. What is it?
It's an investigational oral therapy designed to inhibit lipoprotein, or LPA.
LPA. Okay, this is a really interesting target in cardiovascular disease. Tell us more.
Right. So LPA is fascinating. It's made in your liver, and it's basically an LDL cholesterol particle, the bad cholesterol, but with an extra protein stuck onto it called apolipoprotein, or APO.
So it's like LDL plus.
Kind of, yeah. And the source notes something interesting about this apolipoprotein. Structure-wise, it looks a lot like plasminogen, which is involved in breaking down blood clots. But functionally, ApoA doesn't work the same way. It seems to promote clotting and inflammation instead. Figure 6 in the report gives you a visual. You'd see that standard LDL sphere with this extra APO chain sort of dangling off it.
Okay, so it's structurally distinct from regular LDL. Why is that clinically relevant?
Well, the clinical relevance is huge. Elevated LPA can build up in artery walls, forming those dangerous atherosclerotic plaques, just like LDL cholesterol does. This restricts blood flow and can cause major cardiovascular problems, heart attacks, strokes.
So it contributes to hardening of the arteries.
Exactly. But here's the critical point the source makes, and it's worth really emphasizing. High LPA levels are primarily genetically determined.
So you inherit your risk level. It's not just about diet and lifestyle like regular cholesterol.
Largely, yes. And crucially, it's considered an independent risk factor for cardiovascular disease. That means even if someone has their LDL cholesterol, blood pressure, and diabetes perfectly controlled, having high LPA still significantly increases their risk.
Wow. So it's a risk factor that flies under the radar for many standard treatments.
Pretty much. And the report estimates that around 1.4 billion people worldwide have elevated LPA. That's a massive at-risk population with a genetic driver that existing standard lipid-lowering drugs like statins don't effectively target.
A huge unmet need then. Where is HRS 5346 in development?
At the time of the report, it was in a phase 2 clinical trial in China, specifically for cardiovascular disease in patients identified as having high LPA levels.
Okay, so proof of concept studies are underway. And what does the competitive landscape look like? Did the report use Synapse data for that?
Yes, it did. Figure 7 in the report shows the landscape for LPA inhibitors based on the Synapse database. And the key takeaway from that figure: there are no approved therapies specifically targeting LPA yet.
None at all, despite this huge patient population.
None approved. It shows research into both small molecules like this oral drug HRS 5346 and also larger biologic drugs like antibodies or RNA therapies. But nothing has crossed the finish line and gotten approved for market yet. That figure really emphasizes the unmet need and the potential first-mover advantage for whoever gets there first.
That makes Merck's investment look pretty strategic.
So what's the big picture here? Merck's nearly $2 billion play for HRS 5346 tells us that Big Pharma is keenly aware of this major independent cardiovascular risk factor, LPA, that isn't currently addressed by standard care.
Right, they see the gap in the market.
They're betting big on an oral therapy targeting LPA, and significantly, they're licensing it from a Chinese partner, Hengrui. It highlights the sheer size of the potential market for an effective LPA drug, and it reinforces China's position as an increasingly important source of novel drug candidates for global licensing deals.
Good summary. Oral, LPA, unmet need, China innovation. Got it.
Yeah. Shifting over to immunology and oncology, we have Sanofi acquiring DR0201 from DrenBio for up to $1.9 billion. The agreement date was March 20th, 2025.
Another immunology play, nearly $2 billion again. Sanofi's active here.
They are, and the structure here is interesting. Sanofi isn't buying all of DrenBio. They acquired a specific affiliate company that holds the rights to DR0201.
Asset-specific acquisition.
Right. They paid $600 million upfront cash for that affiliate, with the potential for another $1.3 billion in milestone payments, hitting that $1.9 billion total potential value. DrenBio, the parent company, continues to operate independently with its other pipeline assets.
Okay, so DrenBio keeps its other shots on goal. What does DrenBio do, and what's DR0201?
DrenBio is described as a private clinical stage biotech. They're focused on developing bispecific antibody drugs that specifically target myeloid cells. Myeloid cells are a type of immune cell, and they're aiming these drugs at both autoimmune diseases and oncology.
Targeting myeloid cells. That's an interesting angle.
Yeah. And Figure 8 in the report shows their pipeline. You can see DR0201 listed there, but also other programs like DR01 and DR0202, illustrating that Sanofi acquired one key asset from a broader platform focused on this myeloid cell approach.
Got it. So DR0201 specifically.
It's described as a potential first-in-class CD20-directed bispecific antibody.
Okay, CD20. That's a well-known target on B cells, right? Just like Rituxan hit CD20. So what's different here?
The difference is the bispecific nature and how it works. Its mechanism is about engaging specific myeloid cells, those immune cells we mentioned, and directing them to induce deep B-cell depletion through a process called targeted phagocytosis.
Phagocytosis, basically telling the myeloid cells to eat the B cells.
Essentially, yes, getting the myeloid cells to clear out the B cells very effectively.
Okay, so why does Sanofi want this? Why is deep B-cell depletion valuable, particularly in autoimmunity?
Well, the rationale, especially for autoimmune diseases, is based on early clinical data suggesting that getting rid of B cells so effectively could potentially reset the adaptive immune system.
Reset the immune system, like a reboot.
Kind of, yeah. Think about it for patients with tough-to-treat B-cell-mediated autoimmune diseases, things like lupus, where current options often fall short or require continuous treatment. The hope is that this deep depletion could theoretically lead to sustained remission without needing ongoing therapy.
Treatment-free remission. That's the holy grail in autoimmunity.
Exactly. That's the big unmet need Sanofi is likely targeting here.
And what about safety? Engaging immune cells like that can sometimes cause side effects, right?
It can. But the safety profile mentioned in the source sounds promising for this specific approach. Preclinical data done in non-human primates reportedly showed no signs of cytokine release syndrome, CRS, or neurotoxicity.
No CRS or neurotox. That's significant. Those are major, sometimes life-threatening side effects seen with some other immune-engaging therapies, especially things like CRT cells.
Right. So if DR0201 can achieve deep B-cell depletion without those particular toxicities, that would be a major advantage.
Definitely a key differentiator. Where is it in the clinic?
At the time of the report, DR0201 was already in a phase 1 study for B-cell non-Hodgkin lymphoma, that's the oncology side, but they were also expanding that study to include various autoimmune conditions, reflecting that dual potential Sanofi is clearly interested in pursuing.
Makes sense. Explore both avenues.
So the takeaway here, Sanofi is strategically boosting its immunology portfolio, betting on cutting-edge antibody technology. This bispecific approach, targeting myeloid cells to achieve deep B-cell depletion, points towards a potentially new way to treat stubborn autoimmune diseases, maybe even achieving that elusive treatment-free remission.
And that potentially cleaner safety profile, avoiding CRS and neurotox, is a really key part of the story.
Absolutely. It's targeting efficacy and trying to improve safety over some existing potent immune therapies. Let's pivot slightly from drug assets themselves to the crucial infrastructure that makes all this biotech innovation possible. We've got Advanced Instruments, which is part of Patricia Industries, acquiring and merging with Nova Biomedical. This was a huge $2.2 billion enterprise value deal announced on March 19th, 2025.
$2.2 billion for a tools and diagnostics company. That's significant.
It is, and the result. They're merging, but they'll operate under the Nova Biomedical name. The goal is to create what the report calls a diversified global life sciences tools platform. This combined powerhouse will serve both the biopharma industry and clinical diagnostics markets in over 100 countries.
Combining forces for scale and scope.
Exactly. The stated goal is to enhance innovation capabilities and financial muscle by joining together.
Okay, let's look at Nova Biomedical. What's their specialty?
They are leaders in vitro diagnostics or IVD equipment, basically lab testing equipment. They design, build, and sell the analytical instruments and the consumables, the reagents, and things needed in labs, hospitals, and, importantly for biotech, drug manufacturing facilities.
So the machines and the stuff that runs on them.
Right. And their business spans several critical areas, as the source details. They make the blood gas and critical care analyzers you find in hospital ICUs for rapid patient monitoring. They make analyzers for clinics and doctors' offices, equipment for blood banks, even analyzers used in ambulances for pre-hospital care.
A broad clinical footprint.
Very broad. But crucially for our biotech context, they also make the chemistry and cell culture analyzers that are absolutely essential for both drug research and for the manufacturing process, particularly for biologic drugs. Think quality control during production.
And the bioprocessing angle, that's key.
Definitely. They also have self-testing diabetes meters and offer product development and manufacturing services to other companies. The importance of their products really can't be overstated. They provide immediate sometimes life-saving analysis for hospital patients, think blood gases, glucose, electrolytes. And they provide essential analysis for research labs and for ensuring the quality and consistency of a batch of monoclonal antibodies being manufactured by a pharma company.
Right, critical at multiple points in the healthcare and drug development chain.
Exactly. They're headquartered in Waltham, Massachusetts, and employ around 1,500 people, so a substantial operation.
Okay, so while this isn't a new drug molecule changing hands, why does this $2.2 billion merger matter to you, our listener interested in the biotech space?
It highlights the absolutely critical importance of the tools and infrastructure, the picks and shovels, if you will, that underpin everything in biotech and pharma.
You can't develop or make these complex drugs without the right equipment.
Precisely. Developing and manufacturing complex modern drugs, especially biologics, requires sophisticated analytical capabilities at every single step, from early research to final product release. This merger creates a giant in that essential supporting space. It demonstrates that investors and strategic acquirers see immense value not just in the science of the drug itself, but in the industrial process, the quality control, and the diagnostics needed to bring it safely and effectively to patients.
It's about enabling the whole ecosystem.
Exactly. It's a foundational piece of the puzzle. Now, for a fascinating pair of deals from AstraZeneca, both announced on the very same day, March 17, 2025. Quite a busy day for AZ. First up, they're licensing Alteogen's ALTB4 technology from South Korea for potentially $1.35 billion.
$1.35 billion for a technology platform. Interesting. What does ALTB4 do?
Under this agreement, AstraZeneca gets the global rights to use Alteogen's ALTB4 technology. The specific goal is a big one, to convert multiple oncology drugs currently in their pipeline from intravenous AV infusions into subcutaneous SC injections.
Ah, the IV to SC conversion. That's a major trend. Patients strongly prefer injections just under the skin versus lengthy IV infusions.
Exactly. Huge convenience play. Alteogen's role in the deal is to supply the ALTB4 component itself, both for clinical trials and for the eventual commercial product if these conversions are successful.
Okay, so let's get into Alteogen and this ALTBV4 technology. Who are they?
Alteogen is a South Korean biopharma company founded back in 2008. They have a few key technology platforms, which are shown in Figure 9 in the report. They work on things like long-acting biologics and antibody-drug conjugates, ADCs. But the platform central to this deal is called Hybrozemi. That's their platform for making recombinant human hyaluronidase, and ALTB4 is the product that comes from that platform.
Hyaluronidase. That's an enzyme that breaks down hyaluronic acid in tissues, right?
Right.
How does that help with subcutaneous injections?
Exactly. ALTB4 is described as a novel recombinant human hyaluronidase developed using that Hybrozemi technology. The source explains the Hybrozime method itself is pretty neat protein engineering. It apparently uses parts from two similar enzymes to create a new version that's more flexible and stable while keeping the enzyme's key function.
And that function is?
That function for ALTB4 is critical. It temporarily breaks down hyaluronin, a component of the matrix between cells in the subcutaneous tissue. This essentially clears a path, creating temporary space that allows large volumes of fluid and large molecules, like complex biologic drugs, normally given IV, to be injected and absorbed effectively under the skin instead. Figure 10 likely shows the structure of this engineered ALTB4 protein.
So it makes the tissue more permeable, allowing big drugs to get in subcutaneously, a drug delivery enhancer.
Precisely. Now, okay, here is where this deal gets complicated and frankly pretty dramatic, according to the source material.
Drama in drug delivery.
Apparently so. The source points out that this agreement between AstraZeneca and Alteogen happened amidst escalating patent disputes surrounding this very ALTB4 technology.
Ah, patent wars. That's more like it.
It seems Alteogen already has deals using this technology with other major pharmaceutical companies. The report specifically mentions Merck for developing a subcutaneous version of their blockbuster cancer drug Keytruda, and also Daiichi Sankyo for a subcutaneous version of Enhertu, another major cancer ADC.
Okay, so Alteogen has licensed this tech out before. Who are they fighting with over patents?
The core of the legal battle is with Halozyme Therapeutics. Halozyme is another company that's a major player in hyaluronidase technology. They have their own well-known platform called Enhance. But the dispute here seems to center on Halozyme's MDASE patents.
MDASE patents. Okay. What's Halozyme's claim?
Halozyme believes that Alteogen's ALTB4, if used commercially in products like subcutaneous Keytruda or Enhertu, or presumably AstraZeneca's future drugs, will infringe on their MDASE-related patents. They've specifically targeted Merck, threatening a lawsuit over the development of subcutaneous Keytruda.
Threatening to sue Merck over Keytruda. Those are high stakes.
Extremely high. Merck, for their part, is fighting back. They're challenging the validity of some of Halozyme's patents at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, USPTO. Halozyme stated, according to the source, that they tried to license their technology to Merck, but are prepared to seek an injunction, basically. Try to legally block sales of subcutaneous Keytruda if they don't reach a deal.
Wow. So potential market entry for these convenient SC versions could be blocked or delayed by litigation.
That seems to be the risk. Now, the source includes Alteogen's perspective. They emphasize that their own patent for ALTB4, which runs until 2040, was thoroughly vetted by multiple law firms. They also note that Halozyme's relevant MDA's patents in the U.S. expire earlier in 2034, and they try to distinguish Halozyme's MDA's patents as covering a group of modifications, perhaps suggesting Alteogen's specific enzyme is different.
Trying to carve out their unique space legally? What do analysts think?
The report mentions an analyst view from someone named Ruffett. This analyst apparently expects Merck and Halozyme will eventually settle the dispute, but also questions the strength of Halozyme's broad patent claims if they were actually fully litigated. Though they also note the USPTO might not necessarily side with Merck in the patent challenges. So uncertainty all around.
Sounds like a complex legal situation with no clear outcome yet. What did AstraZeneca say about wading into this?
Their comment, included in the source, was pretty standard corporate speak. They couldn't comment on third-party patents and said they looked forward to working with Alteogen.
Understandable position for them to take publicly.
So what's the big takeaway from this $1.35 billion platform deal between AZ and Alteogen, given all this legal backdrop?
Well, first, it clearly shows that enabling subcutaneous delivery for previously IV-only drugs, especially major oncology drugs, is a huge area of strategic importance for Big Pharma. It's about patient convenience, potentially faster administration times, maybe even shifting care out of infusion centers. It improves the product profile significantly.
It's the drug more competitive, more user-friendly.
Exactly. But second, this specific case vividly illustrates the high-stakes, complex world of platform technology patents. When you have technologies that can be applied across multiple valuable products, you often get these kinds of intense legal battles. It injects significant risk and uncertainty into even the largest licensing deals.
Yeah, it's a reminder that the science is only one part of the equation. The intellectual property landscape, the patents, and the potential for litigation is just as crucial, especially for enabling technologies like this.
Absolutely. Billions can ride on the outcomes of these patent disputes.
And as I mentioned, AstraZeneca had another major deal announced on that exact same day, March 17th, 2025. So while navigating patent disputes on one front, they were making a big acquisition on another. This one was buying Biotech for up to $1 billion.
A billion-dollar acquisition on the same day as a $1.35 billion licensing deal. AZ was busy. What does Biotech do?
The structure for this one was pretty straightforward acquisition. AstraZeneca paying up to $1 billion total consideration. $425 million of that was upfront cash upon closing, with the potential for another $575 million if certain development and regulatory milestones are met down the road.
Okay, and Biotech's focus?
Biotech is a really interesting biotech because they are pioneering in vivo cell therapies.
In vivo, meaning inside the living body. How does that compare to current cell therapies like Sand?
Exactly. This is potentially revolutionary. Current CAR T-cell therapies, for example, are ex vivo. They take weeks because you have to extract a patient's own immune cells, T-cells, ship them off to a specialized lab, genetically modify them in that lab to target cancer, grow billions of them, freeze them, ship them back, and then infuse them back into the patient. It's a complex, lengthy, and expensive process.
Right. The logistics are a major challenge for current CAR Ts.
Biotech's idea is completely different. Their approach aims to reprogram the patient's immune cells directly inside the patient's body to fight cancer. No external modification needed.
Wow. Turn the body itself into the bioreactor. How do they do that?
Their core technology is called ENABL, that stands for Engineered Nano-Antibody Lentiviral Platform. The source explains it uses special lentiviral vectors. These are viruses engineered to deliver genetic material, but designed here to be cell-specific and also immune-shielded, so they don't get cleared by the immune system too quickly.
Okay, so using a virus to deliver the reprogramming instructions directly to the target cells inside the patient.
That's the concept. The grand vision, according to the source, is to offer cell therapy with potentially superior safety, efficacy, and, importantly, scalability. Instead of weeks of complex ex vivo lab work, you could potentially deliver transformative cell therapy in minutes via a direct systemic infusion, like a standard IV drip. Figure 11 helps visualize this concept, probably showing a vector particle entering the bloodstream and homing in on specific immune cells in situ to modify them.
That would be a paradigm shift if it works. What's their lead product?
Their lead asset, based on this ENABL platform, is called ESO-T01. It's described as a third-generation lentiviral vector. It carries a SCAR construct the genetic instructions to build a chimeric antigen receptor that targets BCMA.
BCMA. That's the same target as Abecma, the CAR-T we discussed earlier, used in multiple myeloma.
Exactly. So EOS-T01 aims to reprogram T cells inside the patient to attack BCMA-expressing myeloma cells. It's engineered with that immune shielding function, designed to resist being cleared by phagocytosis. And here are the really exciting parts highlighted in the source. It's designed as an off-the-shelf treatment.
Off-the-shelf cell therapy, meaning not made individually for each patient.
Correct. Potentially manufactured in batches like a regular drug. It's intended as a single dose given directly intravenously, and critically, the source emphasizes it does not require lymphodepletion.
No lymphodepletion, that's huge. Current ex vivo CAR-T requires patients to undergo chemotherapy beforehand to wipe out existing lymphocytes and make space for the infused engineered cells. That chemo has its own toxicities and risks.
Exactly. Skipping that step would be a major advantage in terms of safety and patient convenience.
Okay, this sounds almost too good to be true. Where is it clinically?
The clinical status is early but exciting. The report states the first patient was dosed on January 8, 2025, in an investigator-initiated clinical trial in China. The trial number is NCT06691685, and it's for patients with relapsed or refractory multiple myeloma, RRMM.
So it's actually in human testing.
Yes. This phase 1 trial is primarily looking at safety and tolerability, but also pharmacokinetics, PK, immunogenicity, does the body react against it, and preliminary signs of efficacy with escalating doses. They're looking for evidence of that in vivo reprogramming actually happening. The primary endpoints listed are focused on safety signals common to cell therapies like cytokine release syndrome, CRS, and neurotoxicity, ICANS, as well as dose-limiting toxicities, DLTs.
Makes sense to focus heavily on safety first with such a novel approach.
Figure 12 in the report shows ESO-Biotech's pipeline, all built on this ENABL platform. ESO-T01 is leading the way into the clinic for multiple myeloma, and there are other preclinical programs listed targeting other indications, suggesting broader potential for the platform.
Okay, so why does AstraZeneca buying ESO-Biotech for up to $1 billion matter? What's the significance?
This deal represents a clear and significant bet by a major pharma company on the future of cell therapy. It's a leap towards a potential next generation moving away from the complex, patient-specific, logistically challenging ex vivo manufacturing towards potentially simpler, faster, scalable, off-the-shelf in vivo approaches delivered directly to the patient.
It shows where big players like AstraZeneca think the field might be heading to overcome the limitations of current cell therapies.
Exactly. They're investing heavily in a technology that, if successful, could truly revolutionize how we use cell therapy to treat cancer and potentially other diseases. It's a bold bet on potentially transformative science. Now, for a complex corporate maneuver, the merger of Mallinckrodt and Endo Pharmaceuticals. They announced this cash and stock deal valued at $6.7 billion on March 13, 2025.
$6.7 billion. This sounds like a merger of two established, diversified companies rather than a pure innovation play.
That seems right. Let's quickly sketch out these companies. Mallinckrodt is a global pharmaceutical company with a pretty diverse portfolio. They cover areas like autoimmune and rare diseases, immunotherapy, neonatal respiratory critical care, analgesics, hemostatics, CNS drugs, specialty generics, even active pharmaceutical ingredients, APIs.
A bit of everything.
Yeah. Some products mentioned in the source include Acthargel for autoimmune rare conditions, Inomax for neonatal respiratory support, Ofirmev injectable acetaminophen, Theracos immunotherapy systems, Stratigraph skin substitute. It's broad. But here's the crucial context, noted clearly in the report. Mallinckrodt filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy back in 2020.
Bankruptcy. Why?
Primarily due to the massive litigation related to their past marketing practices for opioid painkillers. They proposed a significant settlement as part of their restructuring plan, initially $1.6 billion, which was later increased to $1.7 billion, to resolve those opioid claims.
Ah, the opioid crisis fallout. That's major historical context for understanding Mallinckrodt's situation and strategy.
Absolutely essential context. Now, Endo Pharmaceuticals also operates through four main divisions. Branded Pharma, with drugs like AAE-Flex for Peyronie's disease and Dupuytren's contracture, focusing on urology, orthopedics, endocrinology. Sterile injectables, like adrenaline injection for allergic reactions. A generics division, making pills, liquids, patches for various conditions. And an international business focusing on specialty drugs in Canada.
So also quite diversified, with branded, generics, and injectables.
Right. Now, the stated rationale from the companies for merging is about creating a stronger combined entity by bringing together two highly complementary businesses. They're aiming for significant cost savings. The report mentions a target of $150 million in annual synergies over 3 years.
The classic merger justification. Combine, cut costs, be stronger.
Pretty much. Structure-wise, it's a $6.7 billion valuation for the combined entity. Mallinckrodt shareholders are set to own the slight majority, 50.1% of the new company. And Mallinckrodt's current CEO, Siggy Olafsson, is tapped to lead the combined entity. Endo shareholders will receive Mallinckrodt stock plus a cash component of $80 million.
Okay, standard merger terms mostly. Any interesting wrinkles?
Yes, an interesting one mentioned in the source is the plan to separate two parts of the combined business after the merger closes. Specifically, they intend to spin off Endo's legacy sterile injectables business and also the combined generics businesses from both Mallinckrodt and Endo into new independent entities.
So merge first, then break off specific pieces.
Yeah.
Trying to create more focused companies, perhaps.
That could be the strategy. Focus the remaining core company on the branded specialty assets, maybe.
Plausible. So what's the takeaway from this complex $6.7 billion merger for you, the listener?
This deal isn't really about a single hot new drug or technology platform. It's about the complex restructuring and consolidation of established players in the pharmaceutical industry. It shows how companies with diverse portfolios, and in Mallinckrodt's case, significant recent financial and legal baggage stemming from the opioid crisis settlements navigate challenges and seek future strength and focus through large-scale consolidation, synergy hunting, and planned strategic divestitures.
It's a window into the financial and strategic engineering that happens at the larger multi-product pharma companies, often driven by market pressures, patent cliffs, or dealing with complex legacies like litigation.
Exactly. Less about pure science, more about corporate strategy and finance in this case. Okay, let's swing back to a major therapeutic area with huge buzz. Obesity. Roche is partnering with Zealand Pharma on petrelintide, a deal potentially worth up to a massive $5.3 billion.
$5.3 billion potential. Roche is making a big statement in obesity here. This was announced on March 12, 2025.
The terms are broad and strategic. They'll co-develop and co-commercialize petrelintide globally, both as a standalone therapy and potentially in a fixed-dose combination product with Roche's own lead-incretin asset called CT388.
The combination play again, combining petrelintide with their own GLP-1 GIP agonist, CT388. That's a powerful strategy hitting obesity from two different angles.
Seems like it. This partnership covers petrelintide globally. Let's dive into the drug itself. What is petrelintide?
The source describes it as a modified amylin analog peptide. Amylin is a naturally occurring hormone involved in glucose control and appetite regulation. Petrelintide is an engineered version. It's got 36 amino acids, and it's been acylated.
Acylated, like we heard with some other peptides, to make it last longer in the body.
Exactly. It's a common strategy to extend the half-life of peptides. Its mechanism is activating the amylin receptor. Activating this receptor helps regulate appetite and energy metabolism, ultimately leading to weight loss. Figure 13 in the report likely shows that peptide structure may be pointing out the specific amino acid sequence and where that fatty acid chain, the acylation, is attached. It's currently in phase 2 clinical development, and it's intended for weekly subcutaneous injection.
Weekly dosing. That's convenient. How does its profile look to support that?
Its pharmacokinetic profile, or PK profile, shown in Figure 14, looks quite favorable for weekly dosing. The report states it has a long half-life, around 240 hours.
240 hours, that's 10 days.
Right, so plenty long enough to support once-weekly injections. Peak concentration in the blood occurs around 24 hours after injection, and its subcutaneous bioavailability, how much gets absorbed, is high, reported at 85%. Figure 14's graphs would visually demonstrate that long half-life. You'd see the drug levels in the blood rise after injection and then decline very slowly over many days, making weekly shots feasible and effective.
Okay, good PK. What about efficacy and safety from early trials?
The phase 1 trial, called ZooPyramid-1, showed promising results, according to the source. Specifically, it demonstrated significant weight loss and was generally well tolerated.
Good combo. Works and safe enough so far.
That's the goal. And the report makes an interesting comparison to the dominant GLP-1 receptor agonists. It suggests petrelintide showed comparable weight loss in this early study, but potentially with a better patient experience.
Better experience, usually meaning fewer side effects, right? Like less nausea or GI issues.
That's typically what it implies in this context, yes. Fewer or less severe gastrointestinal side effects, which can be dose-limiting for some patients on GLP-1s. Specifically, the source mentions the high-dose group in the Phase 1 trial lost an average of 8.3% of their body weight over 16 weeks, compared to just 1.7% for the placebo group.
8% in 16 weeks from Phase 1 is pretty impressive.
It is. And it notes that even a single 2.4 milligram dose resulted in 4.2% weight loss measured at 7 days post-dose. Figure 15 would likely show graphs illustrating this weight loss over time across different dose groups, clearly highlighting the dose-dependent effect and the significant separation from the placebo line.
Okay, so promising early data on efficacy and potentially better tolerability. What's the overall potential seen here?
The potential here, as framed by the source, is that petrelintide could emerge as a best-in-class single-mechanism amylin therapy. It might offer comparable weight loss to incretins, but perhaps be easier for patients to tolerate. And there could be potential for adjacent indications beyond just weight loss.
And then the combination with Roche's own drug.
Right. Combining it with Roche's CT-388, their dual GLP-1 GIP receptor agonist, makes huge strategic sense for Roche. It strengthens their cardiovascular and metabolic pipeline significantly. It offers the potential for potentially optimal efficacy by hitting two key pathways and maybe even enhanced tolerability compared to high doses of single agents.
Makes sense. What about the commercial plans and the money? That $5.3 billion number is eye-popping. Commercial plans involve co-commercialization by Zealand Pharma and Roche in the big markets, the US and Europe. Roche gets exclusive rights in the rest of the world and will handle the commercial production and supply globally.
Okay, shared responsibilities in key markets.
As for the financial commitment, it is indeed huge. Zealand Pharma receives $1.65 billion in upfront and near-term cash. That's $1.4 billion right at closing, plus another $250 million within the first 2 years of the collaboration. That's massive upfront funding.
Serious cash on the barrelhead shows Roche's conviction.
Then Zealand is eligible for up to $1.2 billion more in development milestones, primarily linked to things like starting the large Phase 3 trials for petrelintide monotherapy, and then another potential $2.4 billion in sales-based milestones if the drug is successful commercially. Add it all up, and you get that total potential deal value of up to $5.3 billion. Plus, Zealand also gets tiered royalties on net sales, ranging from high single digits up to the mid-teens percentage-wise.
Wow, that is a monster deal structure. Significant upfront cash, substantial milestones across development and sales. Zealand is well-funded now, and Roche clearly believes this has multi-billion-dollar potential. Did the report mention any patent data from Synapse?
Yes, it did. Using Synapse, searching for petrelintide revealed various info, including patents. The core patent noted was W02024261076A1. The abstract read from the source confirms its focus on amylin analogs for weight regulation and obesity, and specifically highlights the potential for single or infrequent dosing consistent with the weekly profile.
Okay, aligns with the clinical plan. Anything else interesting in the patent data?
Yes, actually. What's particularly intriguing, according to the source description of the patent data illustrated in Figure 16 and Figure 17, is that related compounds described within that same patent family showed good oral bioavailability in preclinical tests.
Oral bioavailability for a peptide like this. That's unusual and very valuable if true. Figure 16 must show drug appearing in the bloodstream after an oral dose in animals.
Presumably, yes. And Figure 17 showed good PK properties consistent with long-acting potential. So, while this current Roche-Zealand deal is focused squarely on the subcutaneous injectable version of petrelintide, the underlying patent suggests the chemistry platform might even enable future development of an oral amylin analog. That would be a potential game-changer down the road.
Could be. It adds another layer of potential value to the technology platform. So wrapping up on this one, another massive multi-billion-dollar deal in the obesity space, this one focused squarely on an amylin analog mechanism. What does it tell us?
It tells us the industry is absolutely not just focused on GLP-1s. They are aggressively pursuing other validated pathways like amylin. It highlights the intense interest in combination therapies hitting multiple mechanisms for potentially better outcomes. And Roche is clearly making a huge bet. backed by serious money, that amylin, especially in combination with their own incretin pipeline, will be a major pillar of future obesity treatment. Yeah, they're positioning themselves strongly in this incredibly competitive market.
Wow.
Moving now to the realm of cancer cell therapy, we see Bristol-Myers Squibb, BMS, consolidating its position. They're acquiring the remaining rights to the CAR-T therapy Abecma from 2seventy Bio. This was an all-cash deal announced on March 10th, 2025.
Ah, Beckma. BMS already co-developed and co-commercialized this with 2seventy Bio, right? So this is about taking full control.
Exactly. The deal was valued at approximately $2.86 billion in total equity value, or about $1.02 billion net after considering 2seventy's estimated cash on hand. The terms had BMS buying all outstanding shares of 2seventy Bio for $5 per share in cash.
$5 a share. How did that compare to the market price?
The report highlights this was an impressive 88% premium over 2seventy Bio's closing stock price just before the deal was announced, $2.66 per share.
An 88% premium. Wow, that clearly shows how much BMS wanted full, undisputed ownership of Abecma. They paid up significantly for it.
Definitely signals strategic importance. So 2seventy Bio, they were the oncology cell therapy spinoff from Bluebird Bio, right?
That's correct. Spun off in 2021 specifically to focus on cell and gene therapies for cancer, with Abecma being their lead commercial product developed in partnership with BMS.
And the core asset here is Abecma, also known as idecaptogene viclicel, or ID-cell. Can you remind us what it is and how it works?
Sure. Abecma is a BCMA-directed CAR-RT therapy. Let's break that down again. BCMA stands for B-cell maturation antigen. It's a protein found prominently on the surface of malignant plasma cells in multiple myeloma, as well as normal plasma cells and some B cells.
Okay, the target is BCMA.
Right. The therapy itself uses the patient's own T cells. That's the autologous part. These T cells are collected, sent to a lab, and genetically modified using a viral vector to express a chimeric antigen receptor, or CRR, on their surface. This DR is specifically designed to recognize and bind to BCMA.
So the T cells get engineered with the GPS to find the myeloma cells.
A GPS and a weapon, yes. These engineered CAR T cells are then grown to large numbers and infused back into the patient. When they encounter cells expressing BCMA, like myeloma cells, the CR engages, activating the T cell to kill the target cell. The source highlights BCMA's critical role in the maturation, survival, and function of plasma cells, making it a crucial therapeutic target in multiple myeloma and potentially other B-cell-related diseases. Figure 18 in the report would visually explain this mechanism, likely showing an engineered T-cell latching onto BCMA on a myeloma cell surface and triggering its destruction.
Okay. And the clinical data for Abecma, has it proven effective?
Oh yes, the clinical data is compelling, especially from the large Phase 3 KarMMa-3 trial. This study compared Abecma to standard combination therapies in patients with relapsed and refractory multiple myeloma who had already received several prior treatments.
So a difficult-to-treat patient population.
Very much so. The results were quite striking. Abecma reduced the risk of disease progression or death by a remarkable 51% compared to the standard therapies used in the control group.
Cut the risk in half, essentially.
Pretty much. And look at the key endpoint, median progression-free survival, or PFS. That's how long patients lived, on average, without their cancer getting worse. For patients receiving Abecma, the median PFS was 13.3 months. For patients in the control group receiving standard combos, it was only 4.4 months.
13.3 versus 4.4 months, that's a huge difference, almost triple the time without progression.
A major clinical benefit. Figure 19 in the report would likely show this as a Kaplan-Meier survival curve. You'd see two lines diverging significantly over time, the Abecma line staying much higher for much longer than the control group line, clearly demonstrating that patients receiving Abecma live substantially longer without their disease worsening. That kind of data gets drugs approved and adopted.
And Abecma is approved, right? Yes. It was first FDA approved back in March 2021, and importantly, it received an expanded indication from the FDA in April 2024. It's now approved for treating adult patients with relapsed or refractory multiple myeloma after they've received just 2 or more prior lines of therapy, including specific classes of drugs like an IMiD, like Revlimid, a proteasome inhibitor like Velcade, and an anti-CD38 monoclonal antibody like Darzalex, moving it into earlier lines of therapy.
So its approved use is expanding based on that strong Phase 3 data. Makes sense.
So what's the takeaway here from BMS paying a hefty premium to acquire full control of Abecma from 2seventy Bio?
BMS already had a significant stake in Abecma through the partnership, but this deal is about consolidating ownership and capturing the full future value. It shows a major pharma company doubling down on a commercially successful, approved cell therapy asset that has demonstrated clear, life-extending efficacy in a challenging blood cancer like multiple myeloma.
Reinforces the value of successful CAR-RT therapies.
Absolutely. Despite the ongoing complexities and costs associated with manufacturing and delivering autologous CAR-RT therapies, these assets, once they prove highly effective and gain regulatory approval, are viewed as incredibly valuable franchises worth taking full control of. BMS is clearly committed to Abecma as a cornerstone of its oncology portfolio.
Okay, makes sense. Let's circle back to AbbVie for another significant licensing deal, this time in the obesity space again. They licensed GUB014295 from a company called Gubra for potentially over $2.2 billion.
AbbVie, back in obesity. Interesting. Gubra, I believe they're based in Denmark, like Zealand Pharma.
Could be. This agreement was announced on March 3, 2025. The terms put AbbVie firmly in the driver's seat for global development and commercialization of this asset. Gubra received a very substantial $350 million upfront payment.
$350 million upfront for a phase 1 asset is significant. Shows high perceived potential.
Definitely. And Gubra is eligible for up to $1.875 billion more in potential development, commercial, and sales milestones down the road, plus tiered royalties on global net sales if it gets to market.
Another deal potentially topping $2 billion total. What is GUB014295? Is it another amylin analog like petrelintide?
Yes, it is. The source describes GUB014295 as another potential best-in-class, long-acting amylin analog.
Okay, so AbbVie is also betting on amylin, similar to Roche. Any twist to this one's mechanism?
The mechanism described is interesting because it's said to be capable of specific activation of both the amylin receptor and the calcitonin receptor.
Dual agonism again, but amylin and calcitonin receptors this time. Calcitonin is involved in calcium metabolism, but also has roles in appetite, right? So maybe hitting both offers an advantage.
That could be the hypothesis. Where was it in development? It was in phase 1 clinical trials at the time of the report, including both single ascending dose, SAD trials, where volunteers get one dose, and multiple ascending dose, MAD trials, where they get repeated doses.
Standard early clinical path. What did the phase 1 SOD results show?
According to the source, the phase 1 SAD trial results showed that GUB014295 was generally well tolerated. Adverse events or side effects were mainly the expected gastrointestinal ones, things like nausea and vomiting. These were described as mostly mild, temporary, self-resolving, and mainly seen in the higher dose groups tested. Figure 20 might show a table or graph detailing the frequency and severity of these AEs by dose, demonstrating their manageable nature.
Tolerability is key for obesity drugs people might take long-term. What about its PK profile? Does it support infrequent dosing?
Yes, the PK profile detailed in the source looks favorable for less frequent dosing. It's reported to have a long half-life of 11 days, which is about 270 hours.
11 days. Again, easily supports once-weekly dosing, maybe even less frequent.
Possibly. The report explicitly says it supports weekly dosing frequency. PK analysis also showed dose proportionality, meaning drug exposure in the body increased predictably as the dose went up. Figure 21 would illustrate this PK profile, likely showing those sustained blood levels over time, confirming the long half-life and dose proportionality.
Okay, good PK, good tolerability so far. Yeah. Did they see any weight loss impact even in that early SAD trial?
Yes, they did observe a weight loss effect. The report states the effect was seen starting just 3 days after the single dose and continued throughout the 6-week trial duration. The average weight loss in the 3 highest dose groups tested, ranging from 3.5 to 6.82 milligram, was about 3% over those 6 weeks, with a range of -1.81% to -3.25%, compared to about 1% weight loss, ranging from 0.52% to 1.25% seen in the placebo group.
3% weight loss from a single dose over 6 weeks in a phase 1 safety trial. That's definitely a promising early signal. Needs confirmation in longer trials, of course, but it's encouraging.
Agreed. So another major play in the obesity market, this one, a potential $2.2 billion plus commitment from AbbVie for a long-acting amylin analog from Gubra, this one with dual amylin calcitonin receptor activity. What's the takeaway?
Well, it strongly reinforces the theme we saw with the Roche Zealand deal. Big Pharma is intensely focused on the obesity market and actively exploring mechanisms beyond just GLP-1s. Amylin is clearly a very hot target pathway right now.
2 multi-billion-dollar amylin deals in the same reporting period.
Exactly. It also highlights the industry's focus on developing long-acting formulations that allow for convenient weekly dosing. And the idea of hitting multiple related receptors, like amylin and calcitonin here, suggests companies are looking for potentially differentiated efficacy or side effect profiles compared to single-target approaches. AbbVie is clearly positioning itself as a serious player in the next wave of obesity therapeutics.
Okay. Let's look at another major transaction in the crucial bioprocessing supply chain, similar to the Advanced Instruments Nova deal. This time it's Thermo Fisher Scientific acquiring Solventum's purification and filtration business for approximately $4.1 billion in cash.
$4.1 billion for purification and filtration. Wow. Thermo Fisher is a giant in the life science tool space. This sounds like a significant consolidation.
It does. This deal was announced on February 25th, 2025. What is Solventum's P&F business?
The source describes Solventum's purification and filtration (P&F) business as a leading supplier of these technologies used broadly in biopharmaceutical production, which is key here, but also in medical technology and other industrial applications. They have global operations, employed about 2,500 people, and generated around $1 billion in revenue in 2024. So a substantial established business.
Okay, $1 billion in revenue. That gives context to the $4 1B price tag. How does it fit with Thermo Fisher?
The report states this business is highly complementary to Thermo Fisher's existing bioproduction business. Thermo Fisher is already a leader in areas like cell culture media, the food for the cells making the drugs, and single-use technologies, like the disposable bags and bioreactors used in modern biomanufacturing.
So this adds another key piece to their bioprocessing portfolio.
Exactly. Purification and filtration are absolutely essential steps in making biologic drugs, especially in the downstream processing part. That is, cleaning up and isolating the desired drug molecule after the cells have produced it. Adding Solventum's innovative filtration portfolio significantly broadens Thermo Fisher's capabilities across the entire biopharmaceutical development and manufacturing workflow, covering both upstream, cell growth, and downstream purification processes.
They're aiming to be a one-stop shop for biomanufacturing needs.
That seems to be the strategy. So similar to the Advanced Instruments Nova biomedical deal we discussed, this isn't about acquiring a new drug asset. It's a massive, multi-billion-dollar acquisition in the crucial bioprocessing space, the tools and technologies needed to actually make the drugs.
The picks and shovels again?
Precisely. It shows that the massive investment happening in biotech isn't just focused on discovering new drugs in the lab. There's equally huge investment going into the industrial infrastructure. The tools, technologies, and consumables needed to manufacture these complex biologic drugs efficiently, reliably, and at the massive scale required to meet global demand. Companies like Thermo Fisher are building integrated platforms to serve that burgeoning market, and they're willing to pay top dollar for established leaders in key enabling technology areas like filtration and purification.
It underlines how manufacturing itself is a critical bottleneck and value driver in modern biotech.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, let's get back to oncology drug development with GSK's acquisition of IDRx for up to $1.15 billion. This deal completed on February 24th, 2025, following an earlier agreement announcement on January 13th.
GSK in oncology, acquiring a clinical stage company for just over $1 billion. What's IDRx's focus?
Terms involved a significant $1 billion upfront cash payment from GSK, with the potential for an additional $150 million if certain success-based regulatory approval milestones are met later on.
$1 billion upfront. GSK must have really liked the data they saw.
Seems likely. IDRx is described as a clinical stage biopharma company based in Boston, and they are focused very specifically on developing precision therapies for a type of cancer called gastrointestinal stromal tumors, or GISS.
GISS, okay, a specific type of sarcoma often found in the stomach or intestines, right?
Right.
Driven by particular mutations.
Exactly. Their lead molecule is called IDRx-42. The source describes it as an effective oral, highly selective inhibitor targeting mutations in the KIT gene.
KIT mutations, yes, those are the classic drivers in the majority of GISS cases.
Right. The report states that primary activating mutations in the KIT gene, particularly in areas called exon 9 and exon 11, are the key drivers in about 80% of GISS cases. The standard therapy for advanced GIST is often imatinib, which is also a KIT inhibitor.
Imatinib, or Gleevec, a groundbreaking targeted therapy, but resistance is a problem.
Precisely. The source emphasizes that resistance to imatinib frequently develops, often due to new secondary mutations popping up in the KIT kinase domain, like in exons 13 and 17. And current first-line therapies don't fully target or inhibit these common resistance mutations, which limits their long-term clinical benefit for many patients.
So patients run out of options as the tumor evolves, a
Mhm.
classic challenge in targeted therapy.
Exactly. And IDRX-42 was specifically designed to address this high unmet need. Its goal is to effectively inhibit all the relevant KAT driver mutations, like exon 9 and 11, and those common resistance mutations, like exon 13 and 17. It aims for broader coverage against the tumor's escape mechanisms.
A next-generation KIT inhibitor designed to overcome known resistance pathways. Figure 22 would likely show a diagram of that KIT receptor tyrosine kinase. Now, IDRX42 fits into the ATP binding site, perhaps illustrating its ability to block activity even when mutations are present. And figure 23 might show the structure of the KIT gene itself, highlighting the locations of exon 9, 11, 13, 17 mutations, and visually comparing which inhibitors cover which mutations, presumably showing IDRX42 having the widest coverage.
That sounds right. Does the preclinical data support this design?
Yes, the preclinical data mentioned in the source supports this. IDRX42 reportedly showed stronger anti-tumor activity compared to imatinib in preclinical KES models that were driven by those primary oncogenic KIT driver mutations. Figure 24 would illustrate this comparison, perhaps showing graphs where tumors treated with IDRX42 shrank more or grew much slower than those treated with imatinib.
Okay, better than the standard up front. What about resistance mutations?
Crucially, it also showed clinically relevant efficacy in models that had those secondary KIT resistance mutations that cause problems for imatinib. Plus, its kinase selectivity profile was described as superior to standard treatments, suggesting it might hit the KIT target more cleanly with fewer off-target effects, which could translate to better tolerability. Figure 25 might show a chart comparing IDRX42's activity against a panel of kinases versus imatinib, highlighting its greater specificity for KIT.
Okay, preclinical package looks strong. Has it received any special regulatory status? Yes. The report notes it received FDA orphan drug designation for the treatment of GIST, which provides certain incentives for developing drugs for rare diseases. And it also received FDA fast track designation for GIST patients whose disease progressed on or who were intolerant to imatinib. That designation is meant to expedite the development and review of drugs for serious conditions with unmet needs.
Both designations indicate regulatory recognition of its potential importance. What about human clinical data?
There is early clinical data. Results from the Phase 11b dose-finding and expansion study, called Strategist-1, were presented at the Connective Tissue Oncology Society (CTRS) meeting in 2024. The report says the study showed good anti-tumor activity and a manageable safety profile in patients with advanced GIST.
Okay. Promising signs in patients. Any specific numbers on response rates?
Yes, they detail the objective response rate, or OR, which means the percentage of patients whose tumors shrank by a significant amount according to standardized criteria, modified RECIST v1.1. In the overall evaluable patient population, N87, the OR was 29%. This included 1 patient with a complete response, tumor disappeared, and 24 patients with partial responses, significant shrinkage.
29% ORR in a heavily pretreated advanced GIST population. That sounds quite encouraging.
And it gets better. In the subset of patients who had been previously treated with at least first-line therapy, N15, the ORR was even higher, at 53%. That included 1 complete response and 7 partial responses. The source also notes that 2 additional partial responses were pending confirmation at the time of data cutoff but were later confirmed, potentially pushing that number even higher. Figure 26 would visually represent this, perhaps as a waterfall plot, where each bar represents a patient's best tumor response, showing a significant number of bars going below the line indicating tumor shrinkage.
Over 50% RRR in the post-imatinib setting. That's definitely hitting the unmet need.
Yo.
What about safety in humans?
The safety findings from Strategist-1 were reported as favorable. Overall, the drug was well tolerated, and treatment-related adverse events, TREEs, were mainly low-grade, mild to moderate, at the dose selected for further development, the recommended Phase 1b dose.
Good activity and manageable safety. That's the combination you want to see moving forward.
Exactly. So GSK buying IDRX for over $1 billion, mostly up front. What's the takeaway message here?
GSK is clearly investing seriously in precision oncology. They're acquiring a targeted therapy for a specific cancer type, GIST. But more importantly, it's a therapy specifically designed to address the major clinical problem of resistance to existing standard of care treatments like imatinib.
It's about tackling resistance head-on,
Precisely. This deal highlights the crucial ongoing need for next-generation targeted therapies that can stay ahead of tumor evolution and overcome resistance mechanisms. Acquiring IDRX-42 gives GSK a potential best-in-class or first-in-class asset aimed at improving outcomes for G's patients who currently have very limited effective options after progressing on initial therapy.
Makes strategic sense for their oncology pipeline.
Okay.
Here's another deal showcasing innovation emerging from China. Radiance Biopharma licensing SYS 6005 from CSPC Pharmaceutical Group, specifically its subsidiary Jushi Biopharma. This one's potentially worth up to $1.24 billion.
Another ADC deal, it seems, and another China outlicense, announced February 19th, 2025.
Right. The terms give Radiance Biopharma exclusive development and commercialization rights for SYS 6005 in major markets outside China, specifically the US, the EU, the UK, Australia, and Canada. Jushi Biopharma, the CSPC subsidiary, retains rights likely in China.
Okay, standard geographic split. What's the financial structure?
Jushi Biopharma receives a $15 million upfront payment. They are then eligible for up to $150 million in development and regulatory milestones, plus up to a hefty $1.075 billion in potential sales milestones if the drug is successful commercially. That totals up to the $1.24 billion potential value.
$15 million upfront is modest, but the back-end potential is over $1 billion. A very milestone-heavy deal, suggesting Radiance is taking on more risk initially, but Jushi gets huge upside if it works. What is SYS 6005?
It is indeed an antibody-drug conjugate, or ADC, as you suspected. It targets a protein called RR1.
RR1, receptor tyrosine kinase-like orphan receptor 1. That's emerged as a really interesting target in recent years, hasn't it? Found on various cancers, but low on normal adult tissues.
Exactly. The mechanism described is classic ADC. The antibody part of SYS 6005 binds to the RR1 receptor found on the surface of tumor cells. The ADC then gets internalized by the cell through endocytosis. Once inside, the linker connecting the antibody and the drug is cleaved, releasing the toxic payload, typically a chemotherapy agent, inside the lysosome to kill the tumor cell from within.
Targeted delivery of a potent toxin. What more does the source say about RR1?
It explains that RR1 is highly expressed in many hematologic malignancies, blood cancers, and also various solid tumors. Its expression is strongly associated with disease progression and potentially treatment response, making it an attractive target. The source describes RR1 structure having extracellular, transmembrane, and intracellular domains, and it explains how RR1 activation, when it binds its ligand or is overexpressed, promotes cancer cell proliferation, survival, and migration by triggering several downstream signaling pathways inside the cell, like the 1-beta-catenin pathway, the PI3K pathway, and the RAS-MAPK pathway. Figure 27 would likely illustrate this, showing RO1 embedded in the cell membrane and arrows pointing to these various pro-growth pathways it activates when switched on.
Okay, so hitting R1 aims to shut down multiple cancer-promoting signals, plus deliver a payload. Where is SYS 6005 clinically?
It's early stage. It received approval from China's NMPA, the regulatory agency, on December 20th, 2024, to conduct clinical trials in China. The registration number is CTR 20250-511. A Phase 1 dose escalation and expansion study in patients with advanced malignant tumors officially began in China on February 16, 2025.
Just started human testing around the time of the deal announcement.
Seems so. The Phase 1 trial aims to evaluate the usual things: safety, tolerability, pharmacokinetics, PK, immunogenicity, and preliminary signs of anti-tumor activity. Patients receive the drug intravenously every 3 weeks, Q3W, with a 60 to 90-minute infusion time.
Standard Phase 1 setup for an ADC. Did the report mention Synapse patent data for this one too?
Yes. Searching Synapse for SYS 6005 showed various information, including patents. The core patent noted was W02020263338A1. The abstract, read from the source, mentions it's an ADC with a high drug-to-antibody ratio, DAR, potentially linked via a reactive glutamine residue engineered into the antibody's constant region, and covers its preparation and use.
High DAR, meaning more drug molecules attached per antibody, potentially increasing potency. Interesting engineering detail. Did the patent show any efficacy data?
Yes, the source highlights test results from the patent using an HCC 10187 human breast cancer xenograft model, that's human breast cancer cells grown as tumors in mice. The results showed that SYS 6005 variants significantly inhibited tumor growth compared to the control group. Specific variants mentioned, like UC961 VCMAE and 2 Q17-based variants, showed inhibition percentages of 38.1%, 55.7%, and 47.7% respectively. Importantly, the patent data indicated that the experimental groups using the He17 antibody variants showed more significant tumor inhibition than a positive control ADC used for comparison, UC961 ICM-MAE. Figure 28 would illustrate this efficacy, likely showing graphs of tumor volume over time, with the lines for the SYS 6005 group staying much lower than the control group line and potentially lower than the positive control line, too.
So promising preclinical efficacy data backing up the clinical development plan and the licensing deal.
Seems that way. So wrapping up this deal, Radiance Biopharma licensing the RRR1 ADC SYS 6005 from China's CSTC Jushi for up to $1.24 billion. What's the significance?
Well, it clearly highlights the continued strong interest and investment in ADCs as a powerful and targeted modality for cancer therapy. RR1 is confirmed here as a high-interest target. And second, it's another prominent example of a Chinese biotech company licensing an innovative, internally developed asset to a global partner for development in major Western markets. It really reinforces the trend of China becoming an increasingly important source of novel therapeutics entering the global pipeline.
The flow of innovation isn't just one way anymore.
Not at all. It's becoming much more multi-directional.
Let's shift back to the medical technology space for another major acquisition. Global leader Stryker Corporation acquiring Inari Medical for approximately $4.9 billion in total equity value.
Nearly $5 billion. That's a huge med tech deal. Stryker is a giant. Who is Inari Medical? Announced Feb 19th, 2025.
The significance noted in the report is that this marks a major expansion for Stryker into the venous thromboembolism, VTE, market. VTE includes conditions like deep vein thrombosis, DVT in the legs, and pulmonary embolism, PE, which is a clot traveling to the lungs, both very serious.
The clot removal market. That's been a hot area in medtech.
Exactly. The report states Inari Medical brings an established presence and leadership position in this fast-growing VTE intervention area.
So Stryker is buying market leadership in a specific growth segment. What are Inari's key products?
Their flagship products, detailed in the source, are the FlowTriever system, which is specifically designed for treating pulmonary embolism, clots in the lungs, and the ClotTriever system, which is used for peripheral vascular thrombectomy, removing clots from veins, typically in the legs, DVT.
FlowTriever for PE, ClotTriever for DVT. Mechanical clot removal devices.
Precisely. These are devices designed to physically extract large blood clots from the venous system, often as an alternative or adjunct to using clot-busting drugs. Thrombolytics.
Okay, and Stryker, just briefly.
Stryker is described as a global leader in medical technology focused on high-tech medical equipment. Their main business areas listed include orthopedic implants, joint replacement, spine, trauma, neurovascular devices, operating room equipment, minimally invasive surgical instruments, navigation systems, surgical robotics, and smart OR solutions. The report notes their strong portfolio, consistent innovation, and history of strategic acquisitions driving their market performance.
So a diversified med tech giant buying a focused leader in VTE.
Exactly. So for you, the listener, what's the takeaway from this nearly $5 billion acquisition? It shows how a large, diversified medical device company like Stryker strategically expands its footprint and market share. They identified a specific high-growth clinical area VTE intervention and acquired an established leader, Inari, to gain immediate scale and expertise.
It's a reminder that innovation and value creation in healthcare isn't just about discovering new drug molecules. It's also very much about developing novel devices, technologies, and procedures used to treat diseases and perform interventions, like physically removing dangerous blood clots.
Right. MedTech is a huge part of the healthcare landscape with its own M&A dynamics. And here's another medical technology deal along similar lines. Zimmer Biomet Holdings acquiring Paragon 28. This acquisition is valued at approximately $1.1 billion in equity value or $1.2 billion in enterprise value, announced January 28, 2025.
Zimmer Biomet, another orthopedic giant like Stryker in some ways, acquiring Paragon 28 for just over $1 billion. What's Paragon 28's specialty?
The terms first. Zimmer Biomet agreed to acquire all outstanding common stock of Paragon 28 for $13 per share in cash upfront.
Okay, a straightforward cash purchase. Who is Zimmer Biomet?
Zimmer Biomet, or ZB, is described as a very established global leader in medtech, founded way back in 1927, headquartered in Indiana. Their focus is on developing, researching, and investing in innovative implants and digital technologies to improve the patient treatment experience. Their business primarily covers orthopedic reconstruction, like hip and knee replacements, spine and trauma equipment, dental implants, and related surgical products.
Big in bones and joints.
Definitely. Some highlighted products mentioned in the source include their RSA surgical robots, the Persona Revision knee system, the Jugger Stitch meniscal repair device, the ITRO Element intraoral scanner for dental imaging, the Sunvasor diagnostic test for joint infections, and the Sternalock system for chest bone closure after surgery. So quite broad within musculoskeletal and related areas.
Got it. And Paragon 28.
Paragon 28 is described as a leading medical device company specializing specifically in the foot and ankle orthopedic space.
A niche specialist within orthopedics.
Yeah.
Foot and ankle.
Exactly. And that leads directly to the strategic rationale for the deal. This acquisition significantly strengthens Zimmer Biomet's market position, specifically in foot and ankle treatment.
Why is that area important for ZB?
Because Paragon 28's portfolio is comprehensive and covers the full range of foot and ankle surgical indications, from trauma repair and deformity correction to total ankle joint replacement. Their star products, like the Gorilla Foot and Ankle Fusion System and the P28 Deformity Correction System, are specifically noted in the source as filling gaps in Zimmer Biomet's existing product line in the foot and ankle segment.
So ZB was maybe weaker in foot and ankle compared to hips and knees, and Paragon 28 brings that missing piece.
That seems to be the logic. It gives them a much more complete offering for orthopedic surgeons who treat the entire lower limb.
Makes sense. So the takeaway here.
Similar to the Stryker deal, this is another clear example of a major medical device company making a strategic acquisition to gain specialized expertise, a broader product portfolio, and increased market share in a specific growing niche within their larger field, in this case, foot and ankle orthopedics.
It shows how these large med tech companies build comprehensive portfolios across the musculoskeletal space, often by acquiring innovative smaller companies focused on particular joints or conditions, consolidating specialized expertise.
Exactly, filling out the product catalog. Now, prepare yourself for this next one. The report highlighted this as a truly massive set of collaboration deals, potentially pushing China's outbound biotech licensing wave to a new high watermark. China's Quantum Healthcare partnered with Biohaven in the U.S. and Amid Bio in Korea in major business collaborations, potentially exceeding a staggering $13 billion.
$13 billion. With a B, for licensing deals originating from a Chinese biotech, that is Landmark, announced January 24, 2025.
The report specifically calls out the sheer scale and the record-breaking nature of these transactions for China's biopharmaceutical outbound deals, noting it's at a record volume for nearly the past 2 years. What was licensed here?
It was a multi-part deal. First, Quantum granted exclusive global development and commercialization rights for their lead drug candidate, a first-in-class ADC called GQ1011.
Okay, licensing out their lead asset.
But second, and perhaps even more significantly, they also licensed out their innovative core platform technology for bioconjugation. This license empowers the partners, Biohaven in the U.S. and Amid Bio in Korea, with the ability to use Quantum's tech to create and develop their own novel ADC drugs, targeting a combined total of 21 different molecular targets.
Wow, so they licensed the recipe as well as the cake, allowing partners to make their own ADCs using Quantum's method against many targets.
Exactly. Licensing the platform itself for broad application is a major validation and potential long-term value driver. What is Quantum's technology?
Their platform is called iDiscovery, which stands for Intelligent Ligase-Dependent Conjugation Technology. It's a method for linking payloads like chemodrugs to antibodies to create ADCs. The source says this platform provides key advantages like high homogeneity, meaning the ADCs produced are very consistent with the same number of drugs attached in the same place, excellent druggability, and superior linker stability.
Homogeneity and stability. Those are critical quality attributes for ADCs, affecting efficacy and safety. So a potentially advanced conjugation platform.
Yeah.
What about the lead ADC, GQ111?
GQ111 is described as a novel ADC targeting FGFR3.
FGFR3. Fibroblast growth factor receptor 3. That's an oncogene implicated in several cancers, especially bladder cancer, right?
Right. GQ1011 uses Quantum's ILDC technology to conjugate an innovative topoisomerase I, Topor A inhibitor payload to an anti-FGFR3 antibody. Topor I inhibitors are a class of potent chemotherapy drugs. The source explains that FGFR3 itself often has molecular alterations in cancers, things like gene fusions, activating mutations, or just being overexpressed, and these act as driver mutations, pushing cancer growth in various tumor types.
So GQ111 aims to deliver a Topo I payload specifically to cells with FGFR3 alterations. What did the preclinical data show?
The preclinical characterization detailed in the source sounds impressive. GQ1011 reportedly showed significant anti-tumor activity in lab models of bladder cancer, head and neck squamous cell carcinoma, HNSCC, and even glioblastoma multiforme, GBM, specifically in models that had FGFR3 overexpression or those genetic alterations like fusions.
Hitting multiple FGFR3-driven tumor types.
Yes. This supports its potential as a first-in-class FGFR3 targeted ADC for these FGFR3-related solid tumor indications. The source also mentions potential for combination use with ICI therapy immune checkpoint inhibitors, and a key safety finding noted was excellent tolerance observed at high doses in non-human primate studies.
Good efficacy and good safety profile in preclinical model checks the right boxes. Any patent data mentioned?
Yes, Synapse search for GQ1011 pointed to patents, including the core patent W02440002154A1. The abstract read from the source mentions the antibody-drug conjugate containing an anti-FGFR3 antibody and a linker payload, covering compositions and methods. The patent also included efficacy data from PDX models.
PDX models. Patient-derived xenografts. Human tumors grown in mice, generally considered more predictive than cell lines. What did the PDX data show?
The source indicates the compound showed strong efficacy, inhibiting tumor growth in these PDX models. Figure 29 would illustrate this in vivo efficacy, likely showing graphs where the tumor volume in mice treated with GQ1011 stays flat or shrinks, while tumors in untreated control mice grow rapidly. Seeing efficacy in PDX models adds significant weight to the preclinical package.
Definitely strengthens the case. So this isn't just one deal. It's a massive multi-billion-dollar set of agreements across 2 continents involving gene quantum from China. What's the big picture takeaway?
This feels like a landmark event. It showcases China's rapidly growing innovation power in biotech, particularly in cutting-edge complex modalities like ADCs and the underlying bioconjugation platform technologies.
It's not just generics or Me Too drugs anymore. This is foundational tech.
Exactly, licensing both a promising lead asset and the core platform technology to major international partners like Biohaven and AMedBio, with the potential deal value exceeding $13 billion. That's a hugely significant event. It really cements the role of Chinese biotechs as key innovators and sources of potentially transformative therapies and technologies on the global stage.
A major validation for gene quantum and a sign of the times for global biotech partnerships.
Absolutely. Okay, let's look at another advanced antibody deal involving a Chinese partner. AbbVie licensing SIM0500 from Simcere Pharmaceutical Group, specifically its subsidiary Simcere Zaiming. This one's potentially worth up to $1.05 billion.
AbbVie again and Simcere, another major Chinese pharma company. This deal was also announced on the busy January 13th, 2025. Lots happening early in the year.
It seems so. The terms here included an undisclosed upfront payment from AbbVie to Simcere Zaiming. Simcere is eligible for up to $1.05 billion in total milestones for this Phase 1 asset. AbbVie is taking the lead on global development.
$1 billion+ potential for a Phase 1 antibody. What makes SIM0500 special?
SIM0500 is described as a humanized trispecific antibody.
Trispecific, not bispecific, but trispecific, targeting 3 things at once.
Exactly. It's designed to target GPRC5D, BCMA, and CD3.
Okay, wait. BCMA, we just talked about that with Abecma and Biotech, a key multiple myeloma target, CD3. That's on T cells used to engage them, right? What's GPRC5D?
GPRC5D is another target protein found on multiple myeloma cells, G protein-coupled receptor class 5 member D. It's emerged as another promising target for myeloma therapies. So SIM0500 hits 2 different myeloma targets, BCMA and GPRC5D, and engages T cells via CD3 simultaneously.
Wow. A triple threat, hitting 2 tumor antigens plus activating the T cells. That's complex engineering. Where did it come from?
It was independently developed by Simcere using their proprietary T-cell engager multispecific antibody technology platform. The molecular design described has a low-affinity but high-target activation CD3 engager arm, aiming to activate T-cells effectively but perhaps reduce nonspecific toxicity combined with those binding sites for the 2 different tumor antigens, GPRC5D and BCMA.
Sophisticated design. What's the proposed advantage of this trispecific approach?
The mechanism aims to achieve strong T-cell-mediated cytotoxicity killing against multiple myeloma cells by utilizing a combination of anti-tumor actions. The potential advantage of targeting 2 tumor antigens simultaneously might be to overcome tumor escape, where cancer cells try to survive by losing expression of a single target. Hitting 2 makes escape harder. Plus, you get potent T-cell engagement directed right at the tumor cells.
Potentially more potent and durable responses. Is AbbVie active in this T-cell engager space already?
Yes, the source notes this isn't their first T-cell engager deal. They apparently paid a $65 million upfront payment back in October of the previous year, 2024, for a license to Evolve Immune's multispecific biologics platform, targeting various targets in both solid tumors and hematologic malignancies. So this SIM0500 deal fits a pattern of AbbVie investing strategically in these advanced multispecific antibody formats.
Building a portfolio of next-gen immuno-oncology assets. Where is SIM500 clinically?
The report states it's currently in phase 1 clinical trials in both China and the U.S., being evaluated in patients with relapsed or refractory multiple myeloma.
Early days, but entering human testing. What's the takeaway message from this AbbVie Simcere deal?
This deal really highlights the cutting edge of antibody engineering, moving beyond bispecifics to trispecific antibodies. It showcases the potential strategy of engaging T cells while simultaneously targeting multiple tumor antigens to potentially achieve greater efficacy and overcome resistance.
Pushing the boundaries of antibody complexity for better cancer targeting.
Exactly. It shows AbbVie's clear commitment to investing in this advanced modality, particularly for hard-to-treat blood cancers like multiple myeloma. And once again, it features an innovative, complex biologic originating from a Chinese biotech partner being licensed by a major global pharmaceutical company.
Another testament to the R&D capabilities emerging from China in complex biologics.
Definitely. Okay, another big deal announced on that pact January 13th was Eli Lilly acquiring the STX-478 program from Scorpion Therapeutics for up to $2.5 billion.
Lilly making a big oncology play. $2.5 billion potential. What is STX-478 and what's the deal structure? Because the structure here sounds unique.
It is unique. Let's look at the structure first. Lilly announced a final agreement to acquire the PI3K inhibitor program, STX-478, from Scorpion Therapeutics. Scorpion shareholders may receive up to $2.5 billion in cash, which includes an upfront payment plus subsequent payments triggered by hitting specific regulatory and commercial sales milestones down the line.
Okay, standard acquisition with earnouts. What's the unique part?
Here's the twist. Scorpion Therapeutics itself isn't just being fully absorbed. As part of the deal, Scorpion will spin off a brand new independent entity. This NewCo will hold essentially all of Scorpion's employees and its entire pipeline of assets, except for the STX-478 PI3K program that Lilly is acquiring.
So Lilly buys the one specific asset they want, and the rest of Scorpion continues as a new company.
Exactly. This new spin-off company will be owned by Scorpion's original existing shareholders. And interestingly, Lilly will also hold a minority equity stake in this new spun-off company.
Wow, that is a creative deal structure. Lilly gets the asset it wants, Scorpion shareholders get cash plus continued ownership in the remaining pipeline through a new vehicle, and Lilly even keeps a small interest in that future potential. Very tailored.
Seems highly tailored. Now let's focus on the asset Lilly wanted so much. STX-478, what is it?
STX-478 is described as a novel mutant-selective PI3K inhibitor.
PI3K alpha. Okay, that pathway is heavily involved in cancer cell growth and survival, right? But previous inhibitors have had toxicity issues.
Exactly. PI3K, or phosphatidylinositol 3 kinase I subtype, is a key intracellular signaling enzyme. It's composed of two subunits, the P110 catalytic subunit and the P85 regulatory subunit. Its abnormal activation, often through mutations, is strongly linked to the occurrence and development of many types of cancer.
And STX-478 specifically targets mutations.
Yes, that's the key differentiator. Mutant selective. PI3 co-mutations in cancer are mostly somatic, acquired, not inherited, and heterozygous, only one copy of the gene is mutated. There are common hotspot mutations found frequently in tumors, particularly in the helical domain, coded by exon 9 like E542K, E545K, and the catalytic domain, coded by exon 20 like H1047R.
Where are these mutations most common?
The source highlights their prevalence. Most common in breast cancer, where they occur in about 36% of cases, with specific percentages given for helical versus kinase domain mutations. But they're also common in other hard-to-treat cancers, like gastric cancer, 15%, colorectal cancer, 25%, head and neck squamous cell carcinoma, HNSCC, 13%, and uterine cancer, 45%.
So these mutations are important drivers across a range of cancers. Why is targeting them specifically so important?
Because hitting the mutated form that's driving the cancer, while sparing the normal wild-type PI3K enzyme that's needed for healthy cell function, could potentially lead to better efficacy and, crucially, reduced side effects. Many earlier PI3K inhibitors were less selective and hit both mutant and wild-type forms, leading to significant toxicities like hyperglycemia and diarrhea, which limited their use.
Ah, the selectivity is key for a better therapeutic window.
Precisely. STX-478's unique advantage, emphasized in the source, is its design selectivity. It aims to selectively target only the mutant forms of PI3K, hitting mutations in both the kinase and helical domains. The intended benefit is to improve the targeting of cancer cells while sparing healthy cells. It's positioned as a potential next-generation PI3K targeting agent that aims to overcome those key limitations of earlier drugs targeting this pathway. Figure 30 would likely illustrate this, perhaps showing the structure of STX-478 fitting snugly into the binding site of the mutated PI3K enzyme, but fitting poorly or not at all into the binding site of the normal wild-type enzyme, visually explaining that selectivity.
Okay, next-gen precision targeting. Where is it in the clinic? The report states it's currently in phase 12 clinical trials, being evaluated in patients with breast cancer and other advanced solid tumors that harbor these specific PI3K mutations.
Entering efficacy testing in targeted patient populations. Makes sense.
So the takeaway here from Lilly's $2.05 acquisition of just this one program via a complex spinoff.
Lilly is clearly acquiring a highly strategic precision oncology asset. It targets a specific common set of mutations found across multiple important cancer types. The key focus here is that mutant selectivity. This represents a significant evolution in targeted therapy design, aiming for potentially better efficacy combined with a much improved safety profile by hitting the cancer driver precisely while leaving the normal version in healthy tissues relatively untouched.
And the deal structure itself.
The unique spin-off structure is also a notable detail. It shows how creative these deals can become, allowing a large company like Lilly to acquire exactly the asset they want without having to take on the entire infrastructure or other pipeline assets of the smaller company, while still giving the smaller company's shareholders ongoing value. It's a sophisticated way to carve out specific value.
Very interesting. Okay, our final major transaction from this early 2025 report involves Gilead Sciences and Leo Pharma. They've entered a strategic partnership focused on an oral STAT6 program with a potential deal value up to $1.7 billion.
Gilead and Leo Pharma. Gilead, huge in antivirals and increasingly oncology, and Leo Pharma, a leader in dermatology. Interesting pairing. Announced January 11th, 2025. What's the focus?
The terms give Gilead global rights to develop, manufacture, and commercialize Leo Pharma's small molecule oral STAT6 inhibitor program for potentially all indications. However, Leo Pharma retains an option to co-commercialize this oral program outside the U.S., specifically for dermatology indications.
Okay, so Gilead leads globally, but Leo keeps skin in the game for dermatology outside the U.S. What about topical?
That's the other key part. Leo Pharma retains exclusive global rights for any topical formulation of a STAT6 inhibitor. They're keeping the skin cream version entirely for themselves, focused on dermatology.
Clear split based on formulation and indication focus. Oral largely goes to Gilead, the derma co-promote option for Leo ex-US. Topical stays exclusively with Leo. Makes sense given their respective strengths. What about the financials?
Leo Pharma is eligible for up to $1.7 billion in total potential payments. This includes a sizable $250 million upfront payment from Gilead. Leo Pharma may also receive tiered royalties, ranging from high single digits to mid-teens percentages, based on future net sales of any oral STAT6 product commercialized by Gilead.
And Gilead gets something if the topical works.
Yes. Conversely, Gilead may receive similar tiered royalties, high single digit to mid-teens, based on net sales of any topical STAT6 product successfully developed and commercialized by Leo Pharma. So they share in each other's success to some extent.
A nicely balanced risk-reward sharing structure across the oral and topical programs. Now let's talk about the target, STAT6. What is it and why target it?
STAT6 stands for Signal Transducer and Activator of Transcription 6. The source explains it's a specific type of protein called a transcription factor. Its key role is being required for the downstream signaling that occurs when the cytokines interleukin-4, IL-4, and interleukin-13, IL-13, bind to their receptors on cells.
IL-4 and IL-13. Those are major drivers of type 2 inflammation, right? and involved in allergies and conditions like eczema and asthma.
Exactly. The source explicitly makes that clinical connection. IL-4 and IL-13 are clinically validated targets for treating Th2-mediated inflammation, which is the underlying pathology in conditions like atopic dermatitis, eczema, asthma, and also potentially chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD.
Oh.
We already have very successful biologic drugs like Dupixent that block IL-4, IL-13 signaling.
Right, so blocking their downstream signal transducer, STAT6, is another way to potentially hit that same validated pathway. What's the potential advantage of targeting STAT6?
Preclinical data apparently suggests that inhibiting STAT6 could potentially treat a broad patient population suffering from these inflammatory conditions. But perhaps the most important potential advantage highlighted is that this program focuses on an oral small molecule inhibitor.
An oral alternative to the injectable biologics.
Precisely. Many patients currently receiving highly effective injectable biologics like Dupixent for conditions like severe eczema or asthma might strongly prefer the convenience of a daily pill if it offered similar efficacy and acceptable safety. Developing an effective oral option for these Th2-driven diseases is a major goal for the industry.
A pill instead of a shot. Huge potential market appeal. What does the competitive landscape for STAT6 inhibitors look like? Any approved yet?
According to the Synapse patent data search mentioned in the source, no STAT6 inhibitors are yet approved for therapeutic use. Research is active, with efforts concentrated in both chemical drugs, small molecules like this program, and biological drugs. But as of the report, there were no marketed STAT6 inhibitors. Figure 31 illustrates this development landscape, highlighting the lack of approved therapies and the ongoing research efforts.
So another area with significant R&D activity, but still an unmet need for approved drugs, especially convenient oral ones.
Seems so. So what does this Gilead Pharma deal tell us? What's the key takeaway?
This deal clearly targets a key validated pathway STAT6 downstream of IL-4, IL-13 involved in major inflammatory diseases. It strategically explores both oral, led by Gilead, and topical, led by LEO, approaches to potentially capture different patient segments or severities.
Covering the bases with different formulations.
Right. But the biggest story here is the industry's significant effort, exemplified by Gilead's investment, to find novel mechanisms and critically more convenient delivery methods like an oral pill for chronic conditions that are currently dominated by injectable biologic therapies. It's about expanding treatment options and improving the patient experience by potentially replacing needles with pills for millions of people suffering from conditions like eczema and asthma.
A major strategic push towards oral therapies and inflammation. Okay, wow. We've really covered a lot of ground, touching on, I think, most, if not all, of the 20 to 21 heavyweight deals detailed in this early 2025 report. Stepping back now, let's try to synthesize. What are the big picture themes that jump out when you look at all these transactions together?
Yeah, looking across the board. Oncology, of course, remains a dominant area of investment. That's no surprise. But what's interesting is the type of oncology deals we saw. A huge focus on advanced modalities. Multiple deals involving antibody-drug conjugates, ADCs, like the ROR1 and FGFR3 examples, next-generation cell therapy innovations like the in vivo approach from Biotech, and highly selective targeted therapies aimed at specific mutations or overcoming resistance, like the KIT and PI3-Con inhibitors.
So not just broad cancer drugs, but very specific advanced approaches.
Exactly. Precision and advanced platforms. Then the other elephant in the room is clearly obesity and related metabolic disorders. We saw multiple massive multi-billion-dollar deals focused on novel mechanisms beyond the current GLP-1 blockbusters. Amylin analogs were huge, the non-incretin ACSL5 inhibitor, and a clear emphasis on combination therapies and also improving tolerability and delivery, aiming for orals.
Yeah, the investment in obesity is just staggering.
It really is. Beyond those two giants, we also saw significant continued investment in central nervous system CNS diseases, particularly depression and schizophrenia with that huge J&J deal, and also in inflammatory diseases like that STAT6 deal, aiming for oral options.
And what about the technologies underpinning these deals?
We saw clear interest in high value placed on sophisticated platform technologies, things like advanced bioconjugation for making better ADCs, novel cell therapy delivery systems like the in vivo ENABL platform, enabling technologies like Alteogen's hyaluronidase for subcutaneous delivery, and of course the discovery platforms yielding highly specific inhibitors against challenging targets like LPA, CAF resistance mutations, RO1, mutant PI3K, STAT6, or dual targets like GPRC5, DBCMA.
Plus those big deals for the picks and shovels.
Absolutely. Can't forget the multi-billion-dollar investments in the essential tools and infrastructure. The bioprocessing purification filtration deals, the diagnostics and life science tools mergers. They show the critical importance of the manufacturing and analytical backbone required to support all this drug innovation.
Any geographic trends that stood out?
The most striking geographic trend, I think, was the prominence of deals involving Chinese biopharma companies. We saw multiple instances, Hengrui, CSPC Jushi, Jinquantum, Simcere, where innovative assets or even platform technologies were licensed outwards from China to major global partners. That $13 billion gene quantum deal package feels like a real inflection point, signaling China's rapidly accelerating role as a source of global biopharma innovation.
Yeah, that was a recurring theme. What are the types of deals themselves?
We saw the full spectrum, really. Outright acquisitions of entire companies, big and small, like Intra-Cellular, Evergreen, IDRX, 270s, Duo Biotech, Nova, Inari, Paragon, Scorpion. Major licensing agreements for specific assets, Lexicon, Hengrui, Gubra, Simcere, Pharma. Strategic licensing of platform technologies, Altigen, Gene Quantum, and complex corporate mergers and restructurings, sometimes involving spin-offs or divestitures, Mallinckrodt Tendo, Advanced Instruments Nova, Thermo Fisher Solventum, Stryker Inari, ZB Paragon.
So companies are using all the tools in the M&A and licensing toolkit.
They absolutely are, tailoring the deal structure to the specific situation and strategic goal. And finally, the sheer scale of investment is just remarkable. Billions upon billions being poured into these specific therapeutic areas and technologies. It reflects a high perceived market potential and strong confidence in the underlying science and the platforms being developed. The mix of large upfront cash payments combined with even larger potential downstream milestones also illustrates how risk and reward are strategically shared between partners in these complex high-value agreements.
So after this deep dive into the major biotech and pharma transactions of early 2025, you've hopefully gotten a real sense of the intense activity, the strategic maneuvering, and the cutting-edge science that's driving this market forward at incredible speed. We've crisscrossed the landscape from CNS therapies and radiopharmaceuticals to novel obesity treatments, advanced cancer modalities, essential bioprocessing tools, and specialized medical devices.
Yeah, and these deals, they really aren't just headlines or financial footnotes. They are tangible snapshots of the industry's current priorities and its predictions, its bets, really on future healthcare needs and solutions. They clearly show which scientific pathways are gaining the most traction, which technologies are viewed as potentially disruptive or enabling, and how companies, both large and small, are strategically positioning themselves for future growth.
It's definitely a complex picture, isn't it? Involving huge sums of money, incredibly intricate science, sometimes navigating tricky legal waters like those patent disputes, but all ultimately aimed at bringing new solutions and hopefully better outcomes to patients.
That's the end goal, yes. All this activity is driven by the pursuit of medical progress.
Absolutely. So, as you, our listener, reflect on everything we've unpacked today from this early 2025 deal landscape, here's a final thought for you to mull over. Given the enormous financial value that was placed on the specific assets and technologies, we discussed things like LPA inhibitors, next-gen obesity drugs targeting amylin or ACSL5, in vivo cell therapies, trispecific antibodies, mutant-selective inhibitors based on these trends. What do you think will emerge as the next big multi-billion-dollar breakthrough areas or technology platforms that major pharma companies will be scrambling to acquire or license in the latter half of 2025 and heading into 2026? What's the next frontier they'll be betting big on?